I stood in the back row of the cathedral, the scent of lilies heavy in the air, as the choir sang softly for the CEO's funeral. David Holloway had been more than just the head of the company. To me, he had been a mentor, a defender in rooms where no one else spoke my name and, though few knew it, someone who had quietly placed his trust in me above everyone else. The board sat in the front row, their dark suits pressed, their expressions carefully arranged into masks of grief. I knew better. For them, David's death wasn't a tragedy. It was an opportunity. A week earlier, just before his heart failed him, David had asked me into his office. I could still see him sitting behind that oak desk, his voice weaker than usual, yet steady. "Karen," he said, sliding a set of documents across to me. "I trust you more than anyone else here. They'll try to destroy what we built when I'm gone. That's why I'm giving you this." I'd stared at the papers, my hands trembling as I realized what they were. An official transfer of his 51% majority stake, with his signature already notarized. With mine. "You'll know when the time is right," he told me. So, at the funeral, I stayed silent. The board had no idea. They glanced at me occasionally, whispering among themselves as if already carving up the empire he left behind. Let them. 1 week later, I sat across from them in the executive conference room. The air smelled of leather and coffee. Their faces were solemn, but there was a glint of satisfaction none of them could fully hide. "Karen," the chairman began, his tone dripping with false sympathy. "We've reviewed operations, and in light of recent changes, we've decided to terminate your position. Effective immediately. Please pack your belongings and leave." The words should have crushed me. Once upon a time, they would have. But now all I felt was a strange calm. I smiled. "I understand. Thank you for the opportunity." They blinked, caught off guard by my lack of protest. No tears, no pleading, just quiet acceptance. "Security will escort you," one of them added quickly, as if afraid I'd suddenly lash out. I gathered my things without a word, walked past rows of colleagues pretending not to watch, and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught my own reflection. My lips curved into the smallest of smiles. How fun Monday would be. Back at my apartment, I set the cardboard box on the floor and opened it slowly. Inside were only a few personal items. My mother's pen, a notebook, a framed photo of my niece. Nothing of real value. The real prize was locked away, safe where no one from the company could touch it. 51%. A controlling stake. Enough to fire every single one of them if I wished. But I knew better than to rush. David had warned me. They'll circle like vultures, show them nothing until they reveal themselves first. And they already had. By Friday, I heard the whispers. Former colleagues messaged me. The board was celebrating. Drinks at the club. Toasts to new beginnings. Someone even joked in the break room that I'd probably cry myself to sleep. Let them laugh. Monday, they'd discover what their arrogance had cost them. Still, as I sat in my quiet apartment that night, grief hit me. Not for the job. I had no love for those boardroom games. But for David. He had believed in me when no one else did. When promotions passed me over, when my ideas were stolen in meetings, when I was told to smile more if you want to get ahead, David saw me. He told me I was the sharpest strategist in the room, even when they tried to make me feel invisible. I remembered our last conversation. "They'll underestimate you, Karen," he'd said. "That's your advantage. They'll think you're finished. By the time they realize, it'll be too late." He was right. I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. On the screen was the folder he'd given me. A detailed outline of board members' hidden dealings, side contracts, and unreported bonuses. Evidence strong enough to burn every last one of them if I wanted. But that wasn't the plan. Not yet. The plan was bigger. I closed the laptop and leaned back, staring out the window at the city lights. The weekend stretched ahead, calm before the storm. I imagined their smug faces Monday morning, their shock when they realized the majority shareholder wasn't one of them. It was me. That thought alone carried me through the night. This wasn't the end of my story. It was only the beginning. Monday morning came earlier than I expected. I woke before the alarm, the silence of my apartment heavy with anticipation. For the first time in years, I didn't have to rush into the office. No hurried coffee, no polite smiles in the elevator. I brewed a fresh pot, sat on my balcony, and watched the city stir awake below me. By now, the board would be gathered in the conference room, congratulating themselves on streamlining operations. They thought I'd vanish quietly into unemployment, maybe beg for a reference, maybe disappear into obscurity. Instead, I was sitting here with something they couldn't imagine. Control. I pulled out the folder again, the legal document David had signed just days before his death. A notarized transfer of his 51% stake, witnessed and validated. It was ironclad. My attorney, Emily Chen, had already reviewed it twice. Her exact words still echoed in my head. "Karen, this is airtight. They'll have no idea what hit them." But David had been clear. I couldn't reveal it too soon. If I walked into that boardroom today waving papers, they'd scramble, rally lawyers, and drag the fight into months of litigation. Number timing was everything. By mid-morning, my phone began buzzing with messages. "Karen, did you really get terminated? They're saying your position was redundant." The board toasted to finally clearing out dead weight. Dead weight. The irony almost made me laugh. Then another message arrived, this one from Nell, one of the few colleagues I trusted. "They're already talking about selling off divisions. Bryce is bragging he'll take over operations. It's chaos." I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the information sink in. They were moving fast, reckless, blinded by their own ambition. Perfect. That afternoon, Emily called. "They'll come at you the moment they realize the truth," she said, her tone crisp, professional. "You're not just an employee anymore. You're the majority shareholder. But until you reveal it, they'll think you're powerless. That's your leverage." "I know," I replied. "David told me to wait for the right moment." "Then wait. But be ready. When you strike, make it final." Her confidence steadied me. Emily wasn't just any lawyer. She specialized in corporate law, sharp enough to dismantle a contract line by line. David had insisted I bring her in months ago, long before his death. He'd been preparing me, even then. That evening, I visited the small office space I'd quietly rented downtown. A modest suite, nothing fancy, but it had one crucial feature: privacy. Away from the board, away from company gossip. Inside, I'd set up a desk, a filing cabinet, and a locked drawer where David's documents rested. I sat at the desk, opened my laptop, and began reviewing the company's quarterly reports. The numbers told a story no one wanted to say aloud. Declining margins, restless investors, and a board desperate to mask the cracks. Without David's steady leadership, they were exposed. And without my 51%, they were doomed. Still, doubt crept in as night fell. Was I really ready for this? To face a room full of men twice my age, all of them seasoned in politics and manipulation? They would mock me, dismiss me, fight me. I remembered the countless times I'd been talked over in meetings, my ideas stolen and rephrased by someone else. The promotions I was promised, then denied. The times I stayed late to fix problems others caused, only to watch them get credit. I clenched my jaw. I was ready. David hadn't chosen me out of pity. He'd chosen me because he knew I had the patience to outlast them, the foresight to see the bigger game. On Sunday night, the board had already started their power plays. Bryce called me unexpectedly. His voice was smug, pretending to be sympathetic. "Karen, I heard you left the company. Tough break. If you're looking for opportunities, maybe I can put in a word elsewhere." I almost laughed out loud. Instead, I kept my tone neutral. "That's generous of you." "Of course, we have to look out for each other, right?" He chuckled. "Anyway, I'll be announcing some new initiatives this week. Exciting times ahead." "Congratulations, Bryce," I replied softly. When I hung up, my smile returned. By next week, Bryce's initiatives wouldn't matter at all. Monday evening, I stood by the window of my apartment, the city lights flickering against the glass. Tomorrow, I would walk into that building not as the woman they fired, but as the owner of the very company they thought they controlled. The thought steadied me, but it also carried weight. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving what David had always told me, that real power isn't loud. It's quiet, patient, waiting until the exact moment when silence breaks into thunder. I poured myself another glass of wine, whispering into the night. Tomorrow. The game was about to begin. The next morning, I dressed with deliberate care. A navy suit, understated but sharp. Nothing flashy, nothing that could be dismissed as a performance. If today was going to matter, and it would, I needed to look like what I was. Calm, prepared, inevitable. When I arrived at the building, security hesitated at first. After all, the board had fired me. But I handed them a sealed envelope with my attorney's letterhead. Inside were instructions from Emily Chen, citing my position as majority shareholder and my right to attend any board meeting. Their faces changed instantly. Within minutes, I was being escorted upstairs, not as an employee this time, but as something they hadn't yet grasped. The boardroom was exactly as I remembered. Polished mahogany table, leather chairs, a wall of glass overlooking the skyline. The men around the table looked up, surprise flickering across their faces when I entered. "What is she doing here?" Bryce muttered, already frowning. I set my briefcase down gently before answering. "Good morning, gentlemen. I believe I have every right to be here." The chairman cleared his throat. "Karen, this meeting is for board members only. As you know, your employment was terminated last week." I slid the folder across the table. "Then you'll want to read this." There was a pause as he opened the document. His expression shifted slowly. Confusion, disbelief, then dawning horror. The others leaned in, eyes scanning the notarized signatures, the legal seals, David's handwriting. Finally, the chairman looked up, his face pale. This can't be real." "It's very real," I replied evenly. 3 days before his death, David Holloway transferred his 51% majority stake to me. That makes me the controlling shareholder of this company. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Then Bryce slammed his fist on the table. "This is outrageous. You expect us to believe he'd hand over control to you of all people?" I met his glare without flinching. "Believe whatever you want. The paperwork is valid, witnessed, notarized, and filed. I've already spoken to my attorney. As of this moment, your authority is subject to my approval." The room erupted. Half the board began whispering urgently. Others rifled through the documents as if hoping to find a mistake. Bryce's voice cut through the noise, harsh and bitter. "She's bluffing. She has no experience, no standing. David would never trust her with this." "Funny," I said softly, "because he did. And unlike you, Bryce, he valued results over politics." His face reddened. "You think you can just walk in here and take over?" "I don't think," I answered, leaning forward. "I know." At that moment, the chairman tried to regain control. "Even if this arrangement is valid, Karen, surely you understand the challenges. Investors, clients, employees. This revelation could destabilize everything." I let the words hang for a beat before replying. "Destabilize? Or restore confidence? Because let's be clear, without David, your house of cards was already collapsing. I've seen the reports. Declining margins, restless investors, deals slipping through your fingers. You've been covering cracks with paint. David knew it. That's why he chose me." The truth of my words silenced them more than the documents had. They knew I was right. The numbers didn't lie. Just then my phone buzzed. I let it ring, deliberately placing it face up on the table. The name flashing across the screen was one they all recognized. Anderson Holdings, our largest institutional investor. The timing couldn't have been better. "Excuse me," I said, answering calmly. "Yes, this is Karen Ellis." The board watched. straining to hear as I listened. Then I nodded. Of course. I'll meet with you this afternoon. Yes, we'll discuss the future of the company. I ended the call and set the phone down. They already know, I said quietly, and they're ready to talk. The look on Bryce's face was priceless, shock giving way to fear. For the next hour, the board scrambled. They demanded clarifications, questioned the legality, tried to argue technicalities. I answered each calmly, one by one, citing the legal validations Emily had prepared. They could delay, yes, but they couldn't undo the fact. The company was now mine to steer. Finally, I stood, gathering my papers. Gentlemen, I'll give you the rest of the day to adjust to the new reality. Tomorrow morning, we'll reconvene. And then we'll discuss restructuring, properly this time. Without waiting for a response, I left the room. The hallway outside was lined with assistants and staff pretending not to eavesdrop. Their eyes followed me, curious, unsure. I offered a small, calm smile as I walked past. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of power settle into place. Not revenge, not yet. This was something bigger. David's words echoed in my mind. They'll underestimate you, Karen. That's your advantage. And they had. Spectacularly. The board didn't wait until tomorrow to panic. By noon, the emails started. First from the company's secretary, then from their outside counsel. Words like contest, capacity, temporary restraining order showed up in bold. They were going to argue David hadn't been of sound mind when he signed. I stared at the screen until the apartment light reflected in the glass looked like a second, colder moon. Emily called before I could dial her. They'll go after capacity, she said, not even saying hello. We prepared for this. You have the notarization, the physician's attestation from the same week, and the 2 witness statements. I've filed a motion for a status quo order. No asset sales, no executive changes, no big contracts, until ownership is resolved. Will a judge grant it? Delaware Chancery likes preserving the status quo. We're on solid ground. Focus on investors. Right. Investors. I took the elevator to the 32nd floor of Anderson Holdings at 2 p.m. The receptionist's smile was professional. The conference room was glass and steel, the skyline a thin blue line behind it. Victoria Hale, lean, early 50s, the kind of calm that comes from seeing everything twice. Shook my hand and sat. We want stability, she said. Not drama. Tell me why you should have our support. I didn't talk about betrayal or boardroom whispers. I talked about numbers. Cash burn is up 11% year over year while realized revenue is flat. Client churn is creeping from 6% to 9%. The board's response has been cosmetic. Headcount moves, press releases, no operational fix. My 90-day plan: freeze non-essential spend, audit every auto-renew contract, shift bonuses from top-line bookings to gross margin, create a retention triage for the top 50 clients with named owners, and bring in an interim COO with P&L discipline. Who? Victoria asked. 2 names David vetted. Sheila Park from Riverton and Adrian Cole, ex-Eastmark. Both have standing offers to consult. I have their availability. She didn't blink. And governance? I'll use shareholder written consent to refresh the board. 3 seats replaced by operators with no ties to current leadership. An independent audit chair within 30 days. Publicly commit to a say-on-pay policy. Quarterly investor calls with segment detail. No more black boxes. Victoria folded her hands. If the court keeps the status quo and your stake stands, Anderson will support you. Conditionally. Deliver the consent, name the interim COO, and keep us briefed twice weekly. You'll have our letter by morning. I exhaled for the first time in hours. Thank you. On the sidewalk outside, my phone buzzed again. Nell. They're telling staff you forged documents. Bryce said you preyed on a dying man. HR ordered IT to pull your emails. I stopped walking. Are they wiping records? Trying. The head of InfoSec refused without a board resolution. He asked for the general counsel's sign-off. They don't have it. Good, I said, and meant it. Not just strategically. Some people still had spines. Back home, Emily's email was waiting. A scanned letter on hospital letterhead, signed by David's physician the week he signed the transfer. Patient is of sound mind and fully oriented, cleared to execute legal decisions. We'd never wanted to use it. Now it was a shield. At 6 p.m., a push alert hit my phone. Industry Weekly. Exclusive ousted VP challenges board with claim to majority stake. The article quoted a senior executive calling me unstable and opportunistic. I read the words twice. They stung exactly once. I responded the way David taught me to respond. Quietly. I forwarded the piece to Victoria with a single line. We will not engage in press theatrics, execution only. Her reply came fast. Good answer. By 7, Emily and I were at her office finalizing the shareholder consent. It was 3 pages and a grenade. Removal of directors A, B, and C. Appointment of directors P, Q, and R. Ratification of interim operating authority for the chief operating officer. I signed slowly, the way you might sign a condolence card, knowing someone's world would change when they read it. Process servers go out at 8, Emily said. They'll be on doorsteps by 9. And the court? Hearing at 10 a.m. tomorrow. We're asking that no personnel changes occur without your consent. If granted, Bryce's empire building pauses. Pauses, I repeated. Patience again. Always patience. We walked the packet to the lobby together. On impulse, I asked, do you ever get used to this part? The part where people show you who they are? She said. I hope not. On the way home, I detoured past the office tower. Through the glass, I could see the glow of the boardroom, silhouettes moving, hands cutting the air. I thought about the times I'd stayed there past midnight fixing someone else's mess while those same silhouettes toasted each other across town. I pulled my coat tighter and kept walking. At 9:12 p.m., Bryce called from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. His message was a mix of threat and faux concern. Karen, be reasonable. You don't know what you're doing. This will ruin you. Come in tomorrow, we'll find you. A soft landing. I forwarded it to Emily. Preserve. Nell texted a photo a few minutes later. A white envelope taped to the boardroom door. Service of shareholder written consent stamped in blue. Under it, a second photo. Bryce's face, mid-argument, eyes hard. They're rattled, she wrote. InfoSec just locked the email purge. GC finally intervened, small wins. Necessary ones. Around midnight, I opened David's old notebook, the one with his shorthand and neat arrows between names. Next to Bryce, he'd written, short-term thinker. Corner him with timelines. Next to the chairman, hates public embarrassment. Loves process. Use it. Beside my name, he'd written one line. Steady hands. I closed the notebook and set it beside my phone. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., a judge would decide whether chaos or calm would govern the next week. At 11, if we held the line, I'd reconvene the board. My board. For the first time. I turned off the lamp. In the dark, the city hummed, indifferent and alive. Power wasn't a roar. It was a pulse you learned to keep. And in the steady space between heartbeats, I could hear David clearly. Let them move first, then make it final. The courthouse was crowded that morning, but when the judge granted the status quo order, the board's last illusion of control shattered. No asset sales, no firings, no new contracts. Nothing without my consent. Bryce left the courtroom red-faced, whispering furiously to the chairman. I didn't need to hear the words. I already knew the conversation. We've lost. At 11 sharp, I reconvened the board. This time, I sat at the head of the table. 3 new directors, serious, competent, independent, took their seats without fanfare. The old guard glared, their outrage muted by the legal order in my briefcase. I'll be brief, I began. The company belongs to its clients, its employees, and its shareholders, not to personal egos. That ends today. Bryce, your resignation is effective immediately. Compensation frozen pending audit. His mouth opened, then closed again. The chairman shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. One by one, their power drained away, not through shouting, not through spectacle, just through paperwork and patience. By the afternoon, investors had issued statements supporting the transition. Staff received a company-wide email. Effective immediately, Karen Ellis will assume operating authority as majority shareholder and interim chair. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages, some congratulatory, some stunned. Nell's text made me smile. Never seen so many people suddenly remember your name. Yet as the day wound down, I sat alone in my office overlooking the city, a framed photo of David on the desk beside me. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was responsibility. He hadn't handed me 51% for revenge. He'd done it because he believed I would protect what he built from those who would hollow it out. I whispered into the quiet. I hope I did it right. The truth is, revenge had never been the goal. Justice was. And sometimes justice looks less like fireworks and more like silence. Steady, unshaken, final. By evening, the building was nearly empty. I walked the quiet halls, remembering the years I'd spent being overlooked, talked over, underestimated. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had fired me to erase me. And in doing so, they handed me the one thing they could never take back. Control. That night, I closed the office door behind me, the city lights stretching ahead. Tomorrow would bring audits, meetings, rebuilding, hard work. But for the first time, it would be on my terms. And that was the real victory. The first thing I noticed wasn't the smell of fresh coffee in the lobby or the chatter of coworkers arriving for another Monday morning. It was the sight of 3 black garbage bags sagging against the marble wall, bulging with what I instantly recognized as mine. My potted fern, dirt spilling from the tilted ceramic pot. A half-crushed photo frame of me and my mother. A tangle of charging cables. Even the bright yellow coffee mug I'd brought from home, the one with "World's Okayest Employee" written on it, sat lopsided on top like some cruel joke. For a moment, I just froze. The air felt too heavy, like someone had yanked all the oxygen from the room. My carry-on bag, still rolling behind me from last week's client trip, thudded against my ankle when I stopped walking. Then his voice cut through the lobby. "Lisa, perfect timing. We're downsizing. Get out." It was my manager, Greg. His tone wasn't sharp or angry. It was casual, almost rehearsed, as if he'd been waiting all weekend to deliver this line. He stood there in his pressed navy suit, gold watch glinting as he checked the time, like he was already late for something more important. "You're 25, he added with a smirk as if it explained everything. "You'll bounce back." The words hit harder than the bags at my feet. Behind him, a half-circle of colleagues had formed, pretending to be busy. Some avoided my eyes, tapping on their phones. Others watched openly, like spectators at a street fight. I caught sight of Marcus from accounting, his mouth twitching like he was fighting a grin. I wanted to scream, to defend myself, to remind them all of what I'd done last week. Flying across the country on 2 days' notice, negotiating with a difficult client, pulling a deal back from the brink. The contract I had closed was worth millions to this company. And now? My reward was seeing my life stuffed into garbage bags like last week's trash. But instead of saying any of that, I just stood there, the sound of my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. "Security will escort you out if you need help with those," Greg said, already glancing at his phone again. "Your access card's been deactivated. Separation paperwork will arrive by email. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I bent down, my hands trembling as I gripped the slick plastic of the bags. The wait was awkward, humiliating. Not a single person stepped forward to help. Not even Naomi, the one I used to have lunch with every Friday. She stared at the floor tiles like they might crack open and swallow her whole. As I straightened with the bags in my arms, I caught Greg's expression. A flicker, the corner of his mouth lifting, just slightly. Satisfaction. That's when I knew this wasn't about downsizing. This was personal. I shuffled through the lobby, my shoulders burning under the strain, my carry-on wheels squeaking against the floor. Whispers trailed behind me like smoke. A few people slowed down to watch me leave, their eyes gleaming with curiosity, as though I were the morning's entertainment. When my planner slipped from one of the bags and fanned open on the floor, pages of color-coded notes, client schedules, meetings lined up for the next 3 months, I didn't even stop to pick it up. I left it there, a splash of order in the middle of chaos. Outside in the parking lot, I shoved the bags into my trunk, my arms aching. Then I sank into the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. That was when something strange happened. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't peel out of the garage in a blaze of rage and rubber. Instead, I smiled. Not the brittle kind of smile you force in front of people, but a calm, knowing smile that rose from somewhere deep inside me. The kind of smile that said, "You think you've won, but you have no idea what you've just started." I raised my hand and waved once, through the windshield, through the glass doors of the lobby where I could still see their faces pressed against the windows, watching. Then I put the car in reverse and drove away in silence. That night, I sat at my mother's kitchen table, steam curling from a chipped mug of chamomile tea. I recounted everything, every humiliating detail, while she listened with her lips pressed thin. "Something doesn't add up," she finally said, her voice steady. "You closed a major deal. Why fire you right after?" The question kept me awake long after she'd gone to bed. Why now? Why so sudden? Why with garbage bags instead of a conversation? I didn't have the answer yet. But 1 week later, my phone buzzed on the table, screen lighting up again and again. First one message, then 10, then 30. By noon, there were over 100. "Lisa, where are you? We need to talk now. This is urgent. Call me back. Where are you?" The same manager who had smirked as I hauled garbage bags out of the building was now blowing up my phone, desperate. I stared at the screen, my lips curling into that same quiet smile I'd given him from the driver's seat a week earlier. He had no idea what he'd unleashed. The first time I actually opened Greg's messages, it was late at night. The glow of my phone, the only light in my mother's small kitchen. I'd ignored him all day, letting the notifications pile up until the buzzing had become white noise. Now I scrolled through them slowly, one by one. "Lisa, please pick up. It's urgent. Where are you? We need your files. Do you still have the Henderson notes? Call me back. This is a disaster." The panic in his words was almost laughable. The same man who had stood in the marble lobby, tapping his watch, smirking at my humiliation, was now begging for my help. My mother, sitting across from me with her sewing kit in her lap, noticed my expression. "What is it?" she asked. I turned the phone toward her. She adjusted her glasses, read a few of the frantic texts, and let out a sharp breath. "So now he remembers your worth?" she muttered. Typical. I leaned back in my chair, the memory of that morning still raw. The garbage bags, the whispers, his smug face. And yet, here he was, 1 week later, desperate. Something was unraveling, and I needed to understand what. The next morning, I opened my laptop for the first time since being fired. At first, I thought about job hunting, polishing my resume. But instead, my fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing something else entirely. Client contact list. From memory, I began writing down everything I knew from the past 3 years. Names, direct phone numbers, preferences, inside jokes, pain points. Information I had carried in my head, not on the company servers. Information that Greg couldn't wipe or stuff into garbage bags. By the time I stopped, I had 4 full pages. It struck me then. I wasn't powerless. Greg hadn't fired an employee. He'd thrown away the one person who understood the very clients keeping his department alive. That realization settled over me like armor. At noon, my phone buzzed again. This time, an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something in me said answer. Hello? Lisa? The voice was familiar, deep, steady. This is David Henderson. My breath caught. Henderson. The CEO I had flown out to Phoenix to meet just 10 days earlier. The deal I had closed. The one worth millions. Yes, Mr. Henderson, I said carefully, my voice steadier than I felt. I've been trying to reach you through your office, he said. But they keep telling me you're gone, that you left suddenly for another opportunity. Is that true? The words slammed into me like a cold wave. So that was the story Greg had fed them. No, I said firmly. I didn't leave. I was terminated, effective immediately. Silence stretched on the other end, and then Henderson exhaled sharply. That doesn't make sense. I specifically told Greg we wanted you as our main point of contact moving forward. You know our operations. You built the solution. Why would they? He trailed off, frustration clear. I could almost see it. Him sitting at his desk, realizing the company had lied. Lisa, he said finally, his tone shifting. Would you be available for lunch tomorrow? I think we need to discuss this directly. When I hung up, my hands shook. Henderson, calling me, not the firm, not Greg, me. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Greg's smug voice in the lobby. We're downsizing. You'll bounce back. And now the puzzle pieces were clicking into place. This wasn't about downsizing. This was about credit. I remembered the way Greg had hovered during the Phoenix meetings, adding nothing, just nodding at my talking points, repeating my phrases as if they were his own. He'd stood beside me in photos, his name plastered first on every slide deck. And when Henderson had requested me directly, that must have been the breaking point. Greg didn't want a star on his team. He wanted the spotlight for himself. And firing me right after closing the deal meant he could claim the victory alone. But clearly, his plan was already crumbling. The next day, I sat across from Henderson at a quiet corner table in an upscale downtown restaurant. He ordered coffee, black. I ordered tea, my hands wrapped tightly around the warm cup to steady myself. I'll be blunt, he said once the server left. Your former boss is in trouble. The implementation meeting yesterday was disastrous. The new hire they brought in had no idea what she was talking about. When we asked about the logistics model you designed, Greg froze. He couldn't explain it. Not one detail. My lips pressed together to hide the smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. We didn't sign with your firm for their reputation, Henderson continued. We signed because of you, and now frankly we're considering pulling the contract altogether. His eyes locked onto mine. Unless what? I asked, my voice low. Unless you come on board. Not with them. With us. As an independent consultant. The offer hung between us like an open door. I should have felt triumphant. Vindicated. And I did. But more than that, I felt something deeper. This wasn't just about revenge. This was about choice. Greg had tossed me aside like I was nothing. But here I was, 1 week later, with the very client he thought he owned, offering me the chance to rebuild on my own terms. I didn't give Henderson an answer that moment. I just nodded slowly, my mind already racing with possibilities. When I left the restaurant, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Greg. Lisa, please. We need you. Henderson is furious. Call me back. I slipped the phone into my bag without replying. For the first time since those garbage bags, I felt calm. Greg wasn't my boss anymore. He was just a man standing in quicksand, and every frantic text was proof he was sinking deeper. And this time, I had no intention of throwing him a rope. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, my mind buzzing with Henderson's offer. Independent consultant. It sounded powerful, freeing, but terrifying too. No steady paycheck. No HR department to hide behind. Just me. I sat at my mother's small kitchen table with a pad of paper making 2 columns. Pros. Freedom, higher pay, direct client relationships, no Greg. Cons, unstable income, legal risks, Greg. Because of course, Greg wasn't done with me. My phone was proof. Overnight, he'd sent another 20 messages, each one more desperate than the last. Lisa, we can work something out. Don't do anything rash, just call me. You're making this worse for yourself if you don't respond. That last one made my blood boil. Worse for myself? I hadn't done anything but work myself to exhaustion for 3 years. He was the one spiraling, and now he wanted me to feel guilty for it. I closed my notebook and pushed it away. I wasn't ready to decide yet, but I knew one thing. I wouldn't go back. By mid-morning, my phone lit up with an unfamiliar number again. For a second, I thought it was Henderson, but the voice on the other end surprised me. Lisa, it's Naomi. I paused. Naomi, the co-worker who had avoided my eyes that morning in the lobby. We used to eat lunch together every Friday. She sounded nervous, whispering like she didn't want anyone to hear. I don't know if I should be calling you, but... She lowered her voice further. Something's happening here. Henderson's threatening to cancel, and Greg is blaming you. He's telling everyone you walked out that you're withholding files to sabotage him. I gripped the phone tighter. That's not true. I know, she said quickly. A lot of us know. But Lisa, he's unraveling. He spent half the morning in his office shouting on the phone. Tristan from legal says the board is getting complaints. I just thought you should know. Her words sank in slowly. Greg wasn't just scrambling. He was panicking. And if the board was involved, this was bigger than one angry client. Thank you for telling me, I said softly. Naomi hesitated, then added, if you do something, if you fight back, just know some of us are rooting for you. That night, I pulled out my laptop again. Instead of wallowing or job hunting, I opened a fresh document. At the top, I typed, Carson Consulting, draft plan. It wasn't much, just bullet points. Services I could offer, skills I had, names of clients who trusted me. But as I typed, the fear I'd carried all week began to loosen. I didn't need Greg. I didn't even need the firm. I had everything I needed in my head, in my experience, in my relationships. By midnight, I had the rough skeleton of a business plan. Nothing polished, nothing official, but something. A direction. And as if on cue, my phone buzzed again. This time, not a text. An email. From Greg himself. Subject line, URGENT, Henderson Implementation. I hesitated before opening it. Lisa, this is out of control. We need you in the office tomorrow for the Henderson meeting. I'll make sure everything is smoothed over, but you need to come in. Without you, this is going to blow up. Don't throw away your career over hurt feelings. Greg. I stared at the screen, stunned by the sheer arrogance. Hurt feelings? Was that how he framed stuffing my life into garbage bags and marching me out of the lobby in front of everyone? My fingers hovered over the keyboard, tempted to fire back a scathing reply. But then I stopped. Number silence was louder. Silence forced him to panic more. Instead, I forwarded the email to Ezra, a lawyer friend from college who specialized in employment law. His reply came within the hour. Don't go back. Don't sign anything. They fired you. End of story. If they're desperate, it means you have leverage. Call me tomorrow. We'll talk options. Leverage. That word lit something inside me. The following day, Henderson called again. His voice was brisk, but there was a hint of impatience now. Lisa, I need an answer. We have another implementation meeting Friday, and I don't trust Greg's team to handle it. If you're in, I'll pay double what you made at the firm. Independent contract. No strings attached. My throat went dry. This was real. This wasn't a fantasy in my mother's kitchen. Henderson wanted me. Not the firm, not Greg. Me. I'll do it, I said before I could second-guess myself. Good, Henderson said. I'll have my assistant send over the paperwork. Friday morning, 10 a.m. Same office building. You'll come as our consultant. The irony hit me like a thunderclap. 1 week after being marched out with garbage bags, I would be walking back in. Not as an employee, but as the client's representative. That night, I told my mother. She listened, arms crossed, her eyes sharp. Just remember, she said finally, this isn't just about proving Greg wrong, this is about proving yourself right. Her words settled in my chest. She was right. Revenge might be sweet, but survival, success, that was the real victory. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed one last time. Another text from Greg. Lisa, if you don't show up tomorrow, you'll regret it. I smiled in the dark. He had no idea how much I was looking forward to showing up. Friday morning, I dressed differently than I ever had for that office. No neutral blouses or conservative flats. I chose a tailored charcoal suit, sharp lines that made me feel taller, stronger. My mother had insisted on ironing it the night before. Go in looking like the boss, she'd said. Walking through the lobby doors felt like stepping into a memory. Only this time, I wasn't dragging garbage bags behind me. This time, I held my head high, a leather folder tucked under my arm. The security guard did a double take when I approached the desk. Last week, he'd avoided eye contact as I was escorted out. Today, he cleared his throat nervously. Morning, Ms. Rivera. What brings you back? I slid a business card across the counter. Henderson Shipping. My name beneath, independent consultant. I'm here for the Henderson implementation meeting, I said evenly. His eyebrows shot up, but after a quick phone call, he handed me a visitor badge. 15th floor, conference room B. I pinned the badge to my suit jacket, smiled politely, and stepped into the elevator. The doors opened, and almost immediately I ran into Tristan from legal. He nearly spilled his coffee. Lisa, he sputtered. What are you... how... Working. I cut in smoothly, brushing past him. Every step toward the conference room felt electric, like the whole building was holding its breath. When I opened the door, Henderson and 2 of his board members were already seated. They smiled when they saw me. Lisa, good to see you, Henderson said, standing to shake my hand. Glad you could join us. Happy to help, I replied, my voice steady even as adrenaline coursed through me. Behind Henderson, I spotted Naomi and Spencer from marketing. Their eyes widened when they saw me, relief flickering across their faces. At exactly 10 o'clock, the door swung open. Greg strode in, flanked by Tristan and a young woman I recognized only from the hallways. Maya, a recent hire. Greg's smile faltered when his eyes landed on me. What is she doing here? He snapped, his voice cracking slightly. Henderson didn't miss a beat. Ms. Rivera is here representing our interests. Given her deep knowledge of the project, it's only logical she be involved. For a moment, the room went silent. Greg's face twitched as he tried to recover, forcing a laugh. Well, of course, if that's what you want. But surely my team can handle... Your team couldn't answer basic questions last week. Henderson interrupted sharply. We won't waste more time. Lisa stays. The power dynamic shifted in an instant. Greg sank into his chair, his jaw tight. I sat across from him, my calm expression hiding the storm raging inside me. The meeting began. Henderson laid out the agenda, then turned to me. Lisa, could you walk us through the logistics model again? Particularly the integration timeline. I nodded, opening my folder. As I spoke, clear, concise, confident, I felt the room leaning in. Even Naomi was scribbling notes. Maya looked utterly lost. And Greg? He sat stiff, clutching his pen so tightly I thought it might snap. At one point, he tried to interrupt. Actually, I think what Lisa means is... No, I said firmly, locking eyes with him. I mean exactly what I said. The silence that followed was thick. Henderson raised an eyebrow but let me continue. It was subtle, but in that moment, the balance tipped. For the first time, Greg wasn't in control. After 2 hours, Henderson called for a break. People filed out for coffee, whispering to each other. Greg cornered me by the window, his voice low and venomous. "Clever stunt," he hissed. "But if you think this little show is going to last, you're mistaken. You don't belong here anymore." I held his gaze, steady as stone. "I belong wherever my clients want me. And right now, that's here." "You're sabotaging me," he spat. "No, Greg," I said calmly. "You sabotaged yourself when you fired the one person who actually understood this project." His face flushed, a vein throbbing in his temple. For once, he had no snappy comeback. When the meeting resumed, I stayed professional, answering questions, clarifying processes. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Greg's silence spoke louder than anything I could have said. By the end, Henderson was smiling. "This is the kind of clarity we needed," he said. "Excellent work, Lisa. We'll move forward with this revised schedule." He shook my hand firmly. Across the table, Greg looked like he might be sick. Walking back through the lobby after the meeting, visitor badge still pinned to my jacket, I felt eyes on me again. The same curious stares from coworkers who had watched me leave in disgrace a week ago. Only this time, there were no garbage bags, no humiliation. Just me, walking out with my head high. And as I stepped into the sunlight, my phone buzzed with a new message. Not from Greg, from Naomi. "We need to talk. Something's happening behind the scenes, and you should know." I stopped on the sidewalk, staring at the screen. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Naomi's text sat on my screen like a blinking warning light. "We need to talk. Something's happening behind the scenes, and you should know." We met that evening at a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the office. She slipped into the booth across from me, eyes darting to the door like we were doing something illegal. When the barista set down our drinks, she exhaled and slid a thin manila folder from her tote. "I shouldn't have this," she whispered, "but I can't watch him do this to you." Inside were printouts, meeting minutes, snippets of Slack messages, a copied email chain that made my chest go cold. The first email was dated the night before my firing. Subject line, RIF justification, client relations. Greg had written, "We can frame this as downsizing. With Lisa out, I'll maintain continuity as the primary closer and qualify for the transition bonus. New hire, Maya, can stand in on paper while we stabilize." The next was to IT. "Please prep a device wipe at 8:40 a.m. and bag personal effects. Access card to be deactivated on arrival." Then a Slack thread that felt like a punch. Tristan from legal warning Greg that Henderson had requested me by name. Greg's reply, "We'll say she left for a better opportunity. Buy us a week." "Lisa," Naomi said softly. "He orchestrated it. He didn't even have another plan. He just thought he could wing it." I stared at the pages until the words blurred. There was nothing dramatic to say. No speech. Just a quiet, immovable truth. I had been used. "Why help me?" I asked finally. Naomi swallowed. "Because you helped me when I started, and because this isn't right." I nodded, slid the folder back toward me, and thanked her. When I got home, I scanned everything and sent it to Ezra with a single line. "What's the cleanest way to use this?" His reply came fast. "Keep it factual. No commentary. Prepare a timeline. I'll draft a letter to the board and to Henderson outlining misrepresentation and breach exposure. You stay calm and professional." I spent the next 2 hours building a timeline. Dates, meetings, the Phoenix trip, the morning of the garbage bags, the calls from Henderson, the botched implementation. I attached Naomi's documents, my offer letter, my termination email. No adjectives, no revenge. The following morning, Ezra sent 2 letters, one to the firm's board and general counsel, another to Henderson's team. The letters weren't threats. They were mirrors. They simply reflected what had happened and what the potential consequences might be if Henderson pulled their contract for cause. By afternoon, Henderson called. "We sent a formal notice," he said matter-of-factly. 72 hours to remedy. If they can't, we terminate and move our business with you as lead consultant. You're covered either way. I thanked him, then sat still for a long time in my mother's living room, my heartbeat finally slowing. There's a difference between vengeance and consequence. I wasn't burning anything down. I was just telling the truth and letting gravity do its work. 2 days later, the firm requested a meeting. Board representatives, HR, legal, Henderson, me, and, of course, Greg. We gathered in a glass-walled conference room on the executive floor. Sunlight poured in, too bright for how small the space suddenly felt. A woman from the board with steel gray hair led the call. "Thank you for joining," she began. "We've reviewed the materials submitted by Ms. Rivera's counsel and Mr. Henderson's notice. We'd like clarity." Greg tried to go first. "This is being blown out of proportion." "Please wait," the board member said, not unkindly. She turned to me. "Ms. Rivera, can you walk us through your timeline?" I did. Cleanly. No raised voice, no dramatics. Phoenix, the contract terms. Henderson's request that I be the point person. The morning of the garbage bags, the device wipe, the visitor badge a week later. When I finished, Henderson spoke. "Our decision to sign was based on Ms. Rivera's work. The misrepresentation to our board, that she had left for another opportunity, put this relationship at risk." Greg leaned forward, palms up. "We had to act quickly. Budget pressures, restructuring." The board member slid a printout across the table. One of Naomi's emails. Greg's transition bonus line glared up from the page. "Mr. Carver," she said evenly, "was this about budget or your bonus?" Silence. Tristan's pen stopped tapping. Henderson's eyes didn't move from Greg's face. For a long 10 seconds, no one spoke. HR cleared her throat. "Given the new information," she said, "we're placing Mr. Carver on immediate leave pending investigation. Implementation leadership for Henderson will transition away from his team." Greg opened his mouth, then closed it again. No watch tapping now, no smirk. Just a smallness I had never seen in him. The board member turned to me. "Ms. Rivera, the firm would like to retain you independently for 90 days to stabilize Henderson and advise on corrective processes. Rate at your proposal. Full authority on the implementation side. We understand you report to Mr. Henderson." I glanced at Henderson. He gave a slight nod. This was what realistic justice looks like. Not a dramatic sacking in the lobby, not a triumphant speech. Just the messy work of putting things back where they should have been. "I accept," I said. After the meeting, Naomi caught me by the elevators. "I'm glad you showed them," she whispered. "I didn't show them anything they didn't already know," I said. "I just put the pieces together." Greg didn't come out of his office. Later, I'd hear he resigned before the investigation concluded. There was no announcement, no spectacle. Just an empty chair and a name removed from the org chart. Consequence, not fireworks. The next 6 weeks were a blur of whiteboards, status calls, and late-night revisions. Henderson's team got their system. Maya learned for real, not as a prop. Naomi stepped up and shined. I invoiced at the end of each week and watched my own letterhead look less strange and more like a future. On a Friday, Henderson walked me to the lobby after our final sign-off. "You know," he said, "I've been telling people you're not a miracle worker. You're just prepared, and that's rarer than people think." I laughed. "I'll take that." Outside, the sky was a hard blue. A courier waited by the curb with a small box I wasn't expecting. Inside, wrapped in tissue, was my yellow mug, world's okayest employee, and the photo of my mother and me in a simple new frame. No note, just a quiet return of what should never have been thrown away. That night, at my mother's kitchen table, we potted a cutting from her hardy jade plant into a new ceramic pot I'd bought on the walk home. Dirt under our fingernails, the good kind. "Not revenge," she said, pressing the soil gently. "Roots." I smiled and set the pot on the windowsill. The plant looked small there, but steady. It would grow. Greg's 120 messages still sit on my phone, archived and unread. Proof of a week when everything he thought he controlled slipped away. I don't need to answer them. I don't need to tell a story about him. Because the real story is this. 1 week after being told to bounce back, I did. But not to the old place. To my own footing. To work that was mine because I earned it, not because someone allowed it. If you're ever standing in a lobby, staring at garbage bags with your life tossed inside, remember this. You don't owe anyone your silence or your fury. You owe yourself a plan. Keep your receipts. Tell the truth. Build something they can't ignore. And when your phone lights up with desperate messages from the person who underestimated you, you'll be busy, watering your own plant,